Thank you for joining us for our second episode of the Pollination Podcast. Today we're going to be interviewing Danny Bost, who is a Regional 1 District Representative for the Florida State Bee Association. Okay, Danny, thank you for joining us today on the Pollination Podcast. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
We were going to talk about bee clubs today, and I know you have a very important role in bee clubs. And I'd just like you to introduce yourself and talk about what you do with the beekeeping clubs.
So, my name is Danny Bost, as you said. I live here in the small town of Bonifay, Florida. I'm originally from North Carolina. Never grew up around bees. So, when I came here to the Panhandle, I become connected in with the association. Your wife at the time, Steph, was our president. And unfortunately, we also was hit at the same time with COVID. So after COVID, I reconnected with you guys and have been a beekeeper since 2019, and I currently run about 14 hives.
Nice. Yeah, I remember when you first came. I think we were in the Vernon Community Center back then. The bee club was.
Yes.
Maybe there was like 2 or 3 or 4 of us at the time.
It was a small amount. I remember I think our Christmas dinner consisted of 6 people, and our main item to eat was, I believe, was a pizza.
Yeah, I remember that. That was, I think maybe Buddy brought that, Buddy Rich. Yeah, I know. And then you took over when Steph was done as president for 2 years, and you grew the club quite a bit. I think we had constantly like 40 people, it seemed like, each meeting.
Yeah, it was just people were coming, like I said, out of COVID. They were looking for any outlet to reconnect with the world. So I picked up the club at a fortunate time. It was the work that was done before I come on board that actually helped the club to continue growing. But it was fun. I didn't anticipate as becoming a beekeeper and going into presidential roles so quickly, but I really appreciate the opportunity because it taught me a lot.
So you had bees already when you joined the club?
Yes, when we moved up from Central Florida to the Panhandle, I saw a post in one of our little advertisements we get in the mail of a lady who was selling numerous hives. She had some 8 frames and 10 frame hives. So right from the beginning, I started learning. I said, okay, what's the difference between an 8 and a 10 frame? Mm-hmm. So I called her and talked to her a little bit, told her I wanted 2 of her 10 frame hives, told my wife I was buying bees. And of course, my wife, being the good lady she is, said, you know absolutely nothing about bees. Why do you want bees? And I was like, well, that's a good thing that you said that, because the next article over on the next page was the Beekeeping in the Panhandle conference, which was going to occur about 3 weeks afterwards. So I was able to purchase my bees, buy all the equipment that I needed, come to the 2-day conference on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, pick my bees up, took them to the house, and I've had bees ever since.
Oh, that's nice.
So,
still holding on to them.
Still going strong so far.
Yeah. So you were president of the Central Panhandle Beekeepers Association here in Chipley for 2 years, and you just hit your term limit. Right now we have Anthony Mosier that's taken over. Mm-hmm. And you basically got a promotion after that, right? So what's your new role?
Well, internally into the association, I was able to step back and just go into the mentor. So I was able to help new beekeepers, which I think is a very valuable asset to any association. I've been able to spend more time with them, able to go out and visit to people to conduct open hives in their yard and show them what are you looking at, what are you doing, what's the bees doing. Because you get those questions all the time. A lot of the first thing you hear from new beekeepers, I open my box up, I pull my frames, I don't know what I'm looking at. So it gives me the opportunity to do that. And the same as you is to be able to have open hive events in my apiary and bring people to the yard and spread them out, show them exactly, hey, this is how you're going to expect. This is what you're going to look for. This is what a good frame of brood looks like. This is what a good frame of honey and pollen looks like. And this is what you're looking for. All right, now spread out amongst the hives and go at it, and I'll walk along and talk with you. So that piece is really good. The other part of it was I picked up from Elmore Herman as the Regional 1 uh, district representative for the Florida State Bee Association. So I'm from Jefferson County all the way over to the Alabama border. It's 200 and some odd miles to cover. And working with the 10 active associations that we have, and kind of bring them back underneath the umbrella of Florida State Bee Association, get that fellowship reconnected, and then look at the areas where we don't have associations and be able to reestablish them there as well. When you go into an area and you don't have a bee association, it's kind of a nightmare because the only thing you really have is the Florida State registered beekeepers within the county. So then you got to reach out to those beekeepers, and they're not always really receptive to being contacted through their cell phone and want to know who you are and why you're calling them.
Yeah.
So you could get into some really interesting conversations doing that. The other part of it is getting them interested and getting them together, giving them the tools to make them productive. Get through that first couple meetings where the beekeepers will start coming in and the new beekeepers are seeing that it's worth their while to come there to be part of something like a local association, but it's also to bring the commercial beekeepers in with all the knowledge and show them like, look, we're not really going to teach you anything new about commercial beekeeping because we're backyard and hobbyist focused, but we need you because you have the experience, you have the tools and the assets that we could send those new beekeepers out to you, and you could teach them so when they actually get bees, they could take that training back to their own yard. So that part of it is fascinating to watch an association to grow and really take off, and that's been the fun part of it.
Yeah, that's I'm glad you brought that up actually, because that was kind of a question I was having, and I wrestle with it myself too, since we're definitely on the small commercial side, but we've become commercial, and we get, number one, flooded with questions from new beekeepers, hobbyists. We sell most of our nuke business is our brand new beekeepers every year, and I figured we must create at least 100 beekeepers every year. Which is a lot, and they all have questions, and they don't just have questions, for the first week. They have questions all year long. They have questions the second year and the third year, and so on and so forth. And it's really tough to handle that much. Your phone just going off 24/7, and you want to help, but you get to a point where it's like I need just a second to breathe. So having the bee clubs is nice because I always try to direct people if they buy a first nuke from me, please. Go to your local club, whether it's here in Chipley or Marianna or Tallahassee, Panama, whatever. All these different clubs for them to learn, and because they have, and also just because beekeeping is so versatile that I'm not always the best person at sometimes and sometimes other commercial beekeepers are the best to teach somebody who's starting out, because we have to we run bees for profit. And it's all about like efficiency and productivity and how much money can get out of this hive before it inevitably dies. And a lot of the people who are starting out, they don't want that. They just want to have a beehive or two in their backyard and pollinate their tomatoes and, make a little honey for themselves and their family. And it's a different style. Like, it's not that the techniques are wrong. We're all still feeding and taking care of our bees. But I have to stop and think, like, these people aren't trying to make, $100,000 a year off those hives in the backyard. They're just want to make a few bottles of honey, and so you have to step back. And I think sometimes it's also nice to have other beginners because they have kind of a different mindset. And I know sometimes I'll start talking to new beekeepers, and I'll just kind of like rattle off way too much information that they're not really ready yet to handle. And I can kind of always tell because their eyes kind of roll back in their head or they glaze over, and I'm like, they just, they're not listening to me anymore because it's just too much. I still remember, because I've only been doing it 6 years now. So I clearly remember when I first started and people started talking about varroa mites and foul brood and mite washes and blah, blah, blah. All these different things. And like my brain just couldn't process all that information because like those terms, like a nuke, like people are like, what is a nuke? And it's a weird word. You don't hear that word very often. What does a queen right hive mean? And and it's just you have to kind of like give them those little chunks of information over kind of a period of time, unless you're really willing to like go to their house and go through their hive and kind of point things out. But even that, it's kind of information overload because beekeeping is not. It's unless you're really in it or you're around somebody who's really in it. It's not like information that you just you deal with on a regular basis. It's like a whole nother world and all these different terms, and I find it can be really overwhelming. So that's where I really like the bee clubs because like us, we just meet once a month here in the Chipley Club, and you can kind of give people these little tidbits of information over a period of a year, which is great too because the bees are changing since it's a seasonal occupation, and it's like I find those little bite-sized chunks of information sometimes are better than like me standing there and rattling off bee facts for an hour, and they're not paying attention in 5 minutes more. So the bee clubs are really great. You started one recently, you said, in Fort Walton?
It was in Walton County in Defuniak Springs. And then the one previous to that one was the Gulf County over in Weewai-Hitchcock, which was kind of odd. The Tupelo Beekeepers Club in Panama City originally started in Weewai-Hitchcock and then pulled stakes and moved to Panama. So when we restarted, I was like, why don't you have bee association in the heart of Tupelo honey?
Yeah, that's strange. I always just assumed that Weewa did have one. And I always wondered why Panama was called Tupelo when I was like, that would fit so well Weewa because they're kind of known for Tupelo.
Yeah, when we first started, it was kind of a debate. Do we want to go and tell them we want the name back?
Right.
But it was established, and so they just went with Gulf County Beekeepers Association. But getting back to what you were saying with, one, I want to thank you and your family for what you do for beekeepers because you do sell the items and you take those times to answer phone calls, and that's what I tell beekeepers all the time. I said you want to go to somebody if you want to buy bees, buy them for somebody who's willing to take time to answer questions. And I might be the fault that's driven some of your pain. But I tell them avoid beekeepers that will sell you bees and say, hey, after they sell them, they're yours. Don't call me. Don't ask questions. I don't care what you do with them. And I tell them to steer clear of those. And I personally appreciate it because I think I used you as a mentor when I first started. And I know you still take calls from me all the time. Hey, I've got some problems. But the associations, as you said, are great with those because it's a place where you could direct new beekeepers. And I think we received some new beekeepers from the open hive event that you recently had. They came and said, yeah, we was just over Matthew Walker's, the apiary. And then, we really fascinated. He told us to come here. And they come here and they learn about them. And then we redirect them back to you to buy the bees, in the spring. So it's kind of like that give-take relationship that we're part of.
Yeah.
And the association also, not only for training that we have internally and open hive events that we do in our area, we have our finger on the pulse for upcoming training that we have through the University of Florida, through the Alabama Beekeepers Association. Some of our local associations do different types of training. And one of the things through the Florida State Bee Association allows me to travel around and see what different programs are offering and be able to pull speakers from them to bring here to speak on issues or on new devices or what it may be that it will be beneficial to the beekeepers locally as well. So if you're listening to the podcast and you're not part of a local association, find out where it's at and get active and become a better beekeeper.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's the right time to come and pick people's brains and ask a lot of questions. And you're right. Yeah, they do offer more opportunities for sure. And maybe we need to do sometimes a better job too at advertising that the bee club is here, and in the other places. When I first started keeping bees, I had no idea about a bee club. I started over there at Sleeping Bear Apiaries, just down the road from me, and I had nobody ever said anything about the bee club. I never heard about it. I think actually my stepdad had mentioned it. That I don't know how he heard about it, but that it was here, and I started coming, and I loved it. And I think Buddy Rich was the first guy. He let me sit next to him, and he was I showed up with like a notebook and a piece of paper and a pen, and I was there taking notes because I was like, I didn't know anything about bees, even though I just got a job on an apiary. I just wanted to learn everything I could, and I'm taking notes. And I remember he was joking like, "Oh, there's going to be a test, at the end of class or something." And he was kind of picking on me, but he was really nice, and Buddy's still coming, which is awesome. And but yeah, I remember that kind of overwhelming, having all those overwhelming questions all the time, and it was nice to be able to sit down and talk to people, and it's so laid back. It's not like hyper formal or it's not like you're sitting in a university classroom or something. It's just people hanging out and mostly talking about bees and eating a lot of food, which is we have the potluck, which is awesome.
They always say if you feed them, they will come. And it is. As a president for the association, I always struggled with the curriculum to not only keep the experienced beekeepers somewhat interested, but not to talk over the head of the new beekeepers that's coming in. Mm-hmm. And it's sometimes a difficult task because even something as simple of hive equipment, we were talking about the equipment you need to purchase to start your beekeeping journey. And I had mentioned a smoker. And a gentleman raised his hand and he was like, "What's a smoker?" It's simple things where you need to get into the weeds sometimes with people. But the good thing about it, when we have our potluck, at 6 o'clock when we come here, you're able to sit down, break bread, socialize, ask a lot of questions of beekeepers, find out who the players are, where you can get bees from, find out the vendors who sell equipment, go through the training itself. And then afterwards, I always tell people, don't feel like you need to rush out the door. We're not pushing you out. We're not going to cut the lights off on you. Sit and talk. And that is some of the best times sitting with Buddy Rich, Elmore Herman, with yourself out on the tailgate of the truck in the parking lot, people picking your brains and just giving them those little bits of wisdom that we always hand out. I think that's some of the best learning that an individual could get.
Oh yeah, I look forward when Jimmy Davis comes, the state bee inspector. He comes and talks. If I know he's coming, I will still. I have a list on my phone, a little notepad app, and I will type questions up as soon as I know he's coming, like all week, because I still have a ton of questions, and I love asking people like Jimmy, and I'll just pepper him with questions, which. I know some of the beginners are looking at me like, just shut up, like you're asking too much, you're talking too much. I remember we had, it was quite a while ago, we had Jeff Pippin, who's the other Jackson County State Bee Inspector. I know he covers a larger area, but he's over there. And he had this really interesting talk on like varroa mites and the viruses, and they had all these really cool scans of the inside of a bee. And that's when I had learned that varroa mites aren't just sucking the honeybee's blood, that they were actually eating their body fats. Mm-hmm. And they had scans showing like their body fats being drained in their body. That was really fascinating, and I think I asked him 100 questions. Like, I remember there were people who put their head down on the table because I just kept asking questions. But yeah, when you have somebody in there and they have that wealth of knowledge, yeah, it's like you want to keep asking because you're like, I may not run into this guy again for 6 months. I want to know everything he knows. And that's really great. And when you have such a diverse group, you got hobbyists, sideliners, commercials, people who never had bees, people who've been doing it for 30 years, and everything in between. Again, you just get such a huge range of answers. And it's just really fascinating because it highlights, again, like how versatile beekeeping is. Like, you can just do so many things in so many different ways. Which, I think that stresses a lot of people out when they're starting because they're like, what do I do? Oh, I can do this 100 different ways. I don't know which way I want to do. And, and they may all like work. And, but that's where it helps to have somebody who has experience and can say, what do you want to do with your bees? Here's 3 options. And I've kind of learned to do that too. Like, I've had to tailor my answers down, not to just the experience level, but instead of maybe, in my head, I'm kind of like calculating all the different variables that are going to be in this given situation. And it might lead to like 7 or 8 different answers for me to give them. That person, they don't want to hear that much, like I'm going to blow their brain up. So you just have to be like, okay, look, here's 3 options. You can do this, this, and this. And, I personally recommend doing this. And usually they'll go with what you recommend. And that I think that's really nice to have that mentorship. I noticed when I went to the Tupelo Beekeepers Association a while back that they had like a mentor program like really in place. I know they used to they started their meeting with like, does everybody have a mentor?
Mm-hmm.
Do you need a mentor? Because there were some new people there, and they had like set mentors, and they kind of took those new beekeepers under the wing. Which I mean, I guess we have that here. They just had like a formal thing. So for our bee club here in Chipley, the Central Panhandle Beekeepers Association, what are kind of like the goals for the club now? Like, do we have any future plans?
The main goals for the association is one to be able to provide the beekeepers with a place to come and learn. Another one is the public outreach. Right now, as we kind of settle down, I think everybody else, we're starting to look to our Thanksgiving dinner, which is going to be on the 2nd of November, and then our Christmas party, which we'll do in December. Then we'll start ramping up just like our bees going in January, getting the word out because, early spring we'll start seeing swarms. And this one we'll work with our local either animal controls or the 911 operators and also the Postal Service. Anybody who may come in contact with a swarm or get a call for a swarm. The infamous mailbox swarm, the mail person will pull up to it and see it and keep on driving, won't say anything about it. But working with them, working with local exterminators, saying, hey, look, we're a local club. We have people who will recover swarms. If you have a report of them, tell the people don't spray them, that, we'll contact you with them. So those are the future things that the club is part of. And also, like you're saying, training of the new beekeepers right now, because right now as we go into the winter is the best time. I tell people, learn. Buy your equipment, get it prepared, find a place in your yard you think you want bees to be at. Place something out there, walk around it, mow around it, make sure it's not an obstruction that's going to cause a tripping hazard or aggravate your neighbors. And then when you get your bees in the spring, you're in a much better place to be able to actually get your bees and be able to successfully keep those bees through the summer, going into the fall, and then hopefully make it through the winter. That's the true test. And whenever you get to the following spring, a year after you get your bees, if you still have bees in the box and they're still doing good, you might be a good beekeeper.
Oh yeah. That's the tough part. That's why I usually tell people, I think everybody kind of does, that's had some experience, like, you want to have bees, buy at least 2 hives. Mm-hmm. The reality is the average loss rate in the United States is 40% colony loss every year. And honestly, that's probably if you're doing pretty decent. You're working really hard just to maintain that 40% loss. So.
And also, if you're listening to the podcast and you come to Florida from out of state, please look out and see how local beekeepers do things. Because I was talking with a gentleman last night in Walton County at their meeting. He come from Colorado, and Colorado, he says, we didn't have small hive beetles. He said, this is a new thing to me. And then we was talking in conversation, he was like, I put protein patties in my hives. I said, be careful with the quantity of it or the size. I asked him, how much do you put in? He said, I just put half. I says, watch it. I said, to make sure that the small hive beetles didn't go in there and lay eggs and create a larva nest. And he had never heard of that. He was like wide-eyed, just like me sitting in the conference, like, what is a varroa mite? These things are trying to kill my bees, but even if you're out of state, beekeeping in Florida is different. Just like beekeeping is different from here than it is in the southern portion of Florida. They get to do a lot of things there that we can't do. Just because you receive something that says this is how Florida's beekeepers keep bees, the panhandle's a little different. Mm-hmm. Get with a panhandle beekeeper, get with a panhandle local association, and start asking questions.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Because I know down in like central South Florida, they'll start raising queens sometime in like January or something. And I've seen I know some of the guys down there will easily have cells ready to hatch 2 weeks before we could even hardly start grafting here. Just because it's so much warmer down there, closer to the equator, so the winter's end a lot sooner. And yeah, I've seen there's some beehives like northern beekeepers will have. They'll have like dark black, deep brown boxes, solid black lids, And I know why they have them up north. It's to attract the heat, to keep them warm so they don't freeze to death in the harsh winters. But you bring them down here and, put them in a field and it's 110 degrees outside. Those poor bees are just being like baked to death, in an oven. You're like, that, maybe not. Maybe you just put a light color, a white or something on there. So, yeah, that is another good benefit of having the local bee clubs, because every climate changes beekeeping dramatically, not just on the timeline, but yeah, you're right, like what different pests and diseases are available. If you, we kind of learned the hard way, if you don't have, everything's not pressure treated down here, you can pretty much kiss any woodware goodbye in about 3 years or so. I mean, it's just a swamp. The high humidity causes everything to rot. Today I went out and just grabbed a beehive. It looked perfectly fine. It was like double deep, and I just went to go kind of rock it back on the pallet. Both my hands just went straight through the box completely, just all the way in. Bees are just eating me up. And I was like, oh man. And I was like, I swear I just got that box. Like, it's been a year or two. It wasn't sitting on the ground. It's just the humidity here just ate it alive. So yeah, every place definitely has its own unique styles. And I always see the pictures of like the Canadian beekeepers. They have those huge honey flows, and you see beekeepers like on a 6 foot tall ladder climbing up there so they can put one more honey super on top. That's amazing. I mean, I struggle to make 2 little honey supers over here. I can't even imagine what that's like. And I've seen some Romanian beekeepers. They don't like to put buckets or anything on top of their hives because it'll drip and freeze the bees because the winters are so harsh. They'll fill sugar water in these like little plastic bags. They almost look like Ziploc bags. And they'll have these really thick lids, kind of like our telescoping lids, but almost taller. And they'll put these little plastic sugar water bags underneath the lid just above the brood nest, and they'll take these little pins and they'll kind of just poke a tiny few little holes in it. So the bees, when it's really freezing during the winter, they can just sort of stick their heads above the top bar from the brood nest, and they can suck through that bag, and it keeps it warm. So there's so many different ways to keep bees, and definitely talk to local beekeepers to get the right information.
If you're interested in joining an association, you could email us at the Central Panhandle Beekeepers Association on the Facebook, or reach out to us through Facebook. There's 2 Facebook pages. One is Panhandle Beekeepers, and the other is the Florida Panhandle Beekeeper Community. I try to direct people to those 2 because we try to keep only local Panhandle beekeepers in there so that you can get in good local information about what we do in a Panhandle. A lot of people come in from South Florida and you want to add a lot of information, but I try to limit them because beekeeping there changes a little bit. They don't have to feed as much as we do. They don't go through the dearth maybe as much as we do, but they're able to do events throughout the year that we can't. So look at one of those links. You can go through the University of Florida. They have a really good system. Auburn University in Alabama has a really good bee program, and also Georgia has a really good program. It's a good place to learn about bees, get the basic knowledge, but if you really want to know what's happening in your area, you need to get connected with a local beekeeper and get a local mentor to be able to help you in your apiaries.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming, Danny.
Thanks for having me.
And hopefully we'll catch you next time.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much for joining us today on the Pollination Podcast. I'm Matthew Walker from Walk in the Woods Apiary. We hope we have answered a few of your beekeeping and pollinator questions. Please share your questions and comments to our Facebook page at the Pollination Podcast.